Germany is marking 30 years of the country's reunification. On this 3rd of October, Germany's national holiday. The country's President Frank-Walter Steinmeier gave a keynote speech at the official ceremony in Potsdam near Berlin, an event that was significantly scaled down due to the coronavirus pandemic.
A landmark date, celebrating 30 years since a divided Germany became one again. The Babelsberg Film Studios in Potsdam, just outside Berlin, provided the stage for the official ceremony. A toned-down event due to the coronavirus pandemic. Only 230 guests were present, about 1/5 of the audience originally planned. Plans for a big street party had to be abandoned. In his keynote speech, German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier said the pandemic couldn't blunt the country's pride in the achievement of reunification. He paid tribute to the peaceful revolution in communist East Germany that brought down the Berlin Wall in November 1989. In 2020, the German Federal Republic is a country that has been molded by East Germans and West Germans, well-rooted families and migrants. It is a country that draws hope from the victory of the ideas of 1989. Many were the lessons learned from Germany's division and reunification, Steinmeier said, including the country's strong belief in international cooperation, an approach now often being called into question around the world. We Germans are committed to international cooperation, even though it has become harder, especially since it has become harder. We want to stand up for a strong and fair international order, together with our partners in Europe. Ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, this too is a lesson and mission we've inherited from our history. A day of remembrance, but also of celebration, accompanied by performances appealing to the musical tastes of all age groups, including the almost 13 million Germans who are 30 years old or younger, who never experienced a divided Germany. A country now united, but where economic and sometimes cultural differences still exist. Recent polls show 2/3 of Germans don't think the process of reunification is complete, a task that will be up to younger generations to accomplish in the years to come.
Well, let's bring in our correspondents, Nina Hase in Potsdam and Thomas Sparrow in Berlin, who've been covering events today. Nina, let's start with you. You've been following President Steinmeier's address. What's your take on what he said?
Well, I thought it was a very good speech. It was very long, and President Steinmeier stressed the fact that we mustn't forget that it was a peaceful revolution that ultimately led to German unification, that first brought down the Berlin Wall in 1989 and then helped bring down the GDR, the socialist dictatorship as some call it. And he said, of course there are still differences there between East and West, but what we mustn't forget is that the spirit of this peaceful revolution is something that we need to remember when we look at what's going on in the world, and that people want freedom and democracy around the world, and that they're willing to sacrifice a lot for it. And there are people here in Germany, that's what President Steinmeier also said, who are beginning to question that very system of democracy, and that they must do everything against those groups.
He was quite directly referring to a rise in right-wing populism recently. We've prepared a soundbite there. Let's listen in.
How ignorant of historical fact must those be who would raise the black, white and red flag of the German Empire of 1871, or even the battle flag, in front of the democratically elected parliament. They want a different country, authoritarian and aggressively exclusionary. They're part of a tradition that doesn't stand for our republic or our democracy. No, today we stand firmly on the bedrock of a struggle for freedom and a history of democracy.
President Steinmeier there criticizing those waving imperial German flags in front of the German parliament recently. Thomas, can you give us some background on this?
Well, those who were actually waving those flags in front of the German parliament a few weeks ago, many of them belong to a group called the Reichsbürger, and the Reichsbürger are actually against the German state. They don't believe even in the existence of the German state. We saw a couple of people here, a very small group of people here at the Brandenburg Gate today, also waving some of those imperial flags, having T-shirts, wearing T-shirts with conspiracy theories. So they were also probably at the protests a few weeks ago here in Berlin. There are other protests here at the Brandenburg Gate today as well, including very loud, you can probably hear them, group of communists from Latin America that are very skeptical of German unity and are in favor of the GDR, of the German Democratic Republic. So you can clearly see there's different groups of people here in Berlin. Normally this is the place where German unity is celebrated, but because of the coronavirus pandemic, celebrations here in Berlin were cancelled.
Thomas, 30 years after reunification, these protests, are they also a sign of differences, big differences that still exist between East and West Germany?
There are signs of different views on democracy, of different views on the German unity. There's not only one narrative about what happened 30 years ago and about how this has developed in the last 3 decades. And it is important also to stress these differences between East and West. There are differences, for example, when it comes to wages, when it comes to unemployment, that mostly affect people in the East. But it's also important to stress that 3 decades after German reunification, Germany has indeed progressed a lot. Germany has indeed become a very stable, prosperous country at the heart of Europe, and that's something that German political leaders are very proud about.
Let's come back to you, Nina. You're in Potsdam, where the central event was being held earlier today. What else is planned for today?
Well, of course, Thomas mentioned it. The official festivities have all been scaled down. They've been cancelled in Berlin altogether. But Potsdam here has installed a big alley where all the individual federal states have a chance to present themselves in cubes. I hope you can see them behind me in the background. And so people are strolling by and just learning about each other, essentially, learning about other regions in Germany. Then there will be more festivities going on at a central square here in Potsdam, and at 7 o'clock German time, the whole country is supposed to sing together. This is something which is going to happen remotely, but the main event is going to take place in Leipzig, of course, a very important place when you look at the peaceful revolution that led to German unification ultimately. And so the whole country can join in virtually, as we do everything virtually, most things virtually these days during the coronavirus pandemic.
Nina Hase in Potsdam and Thomas Sparrow in Berlin. Thank you both.